Quiet on set. Speed and action.
My mom always said life was like a box of chocolates. You never know what you're going to get.
Welcome to the Foot and Friends on Film podcast, discussing everything about cinema. Now here's your host, Nick Baylor.
We have a problem. Knock, knock.
Welcome to the official podcast of Foot and Friends on Film.com, where we discuss everything about cinema. I'm your host, Nick Mailer. On today's episode, John H. Foote and I discuss the life and work of somebody everybody likes and nobody dislikes, Mr. Tom Hanks. We talk about his early years as a sitcom star, leading up to his most recent Academy Award nomination for playing Mr. Rogers. So take your seats, it's time for your feature presentation. As I mentioned, we are the official podcast of Foot and Friends on Film.com, where our motto is, any film you have not seen is a new experience. Today we're talking all about Tom Hanks. So, as usual, I got on the phone with John H. Foote, our veteran film critic and namesake. So without further ado, please welcome John H. Foote. So how's it going?
Good. Excellent.
Something I find amusing, there was an episode of Last Week Tonight with John Oliver, all dedicated to North Korea. And apparently they're big fans of the accordion there. And for that reason, he had Weird Al Yankovic come on and perform a song called Please Don't Bomb Us, Please Don't Nuke Us, North Korea. And the interlude to the song was a breakdown where Weird Al sang, would you think this through for a moment, please? Why would you bomb our nice celebrities? Why in the world would you kill Tom Hanks? Because nobody doesn't like Tom Hanks. And then this big banner of Tom Hanks came down. And I happen to think that that might be true for Mr. Hanks. Do you know anyone who doesn't like Tom Hanks?
I do not. He's a very likable guy, and by all accounts, a nice guy. You know, he's honest to a fault, and just a truly decent guy. And there's not a lot of that in that business. I mean, there's some real nasty people in Hollywood, and Tom Hanks just doesn't seem to be one of them.
Yeah, he's also has a notable distinction that, as far as I'm aware, he is the only person who on Saturday Night Live Celebrity Jeopardy has portrayed themselves, which I found amusing. He played a very stupid version of himself, but because it was Hanks, everyone was along for the ride. We all know about his breakthrough in the early 90s as a leading man. What can you tell us about Tom Hanks's early career?
A lot of stage, a lot of regional theater, and then he started breaking through in sitcom television in the 70s. He was on Happy Days. He played a karate master that was going to beat up Fonzie, and of course that never happened. He did a Laverne and Shirley episode. He bounced around quite a bit. He landed a recurring role on Family Ties as the alcoholic uncle and was nominated for an Emmy, and then ended up on Bosom Buddies, in which these two guys to rent an apartment had to dress as women and pretend to be girls. And it's just awful, but it was successful. I mean, most sitcom television in the 80s was just dreadful, but it was a hit. And from there, he started moving into movies, and his big breakthrough in a film was Splash with Ron Howard, the mermaid film, in which he displayed real comic chops and a likability that's carried on to this day. I think the nicest thing you can say about Tom Hanks as an actor, that is not saying he's a great actor, which he is that he's got such a decency about him. And not a lot of actors have that, but Tom Hanks has it in spades.
Now, that's not to say he can't play a jerk well. For example, let's talk a little bit about A League of Their Own.
Just a tremendous performance. he needed a league of their own. He had just made a film called The Bonfire of the Vanities. That's one of the most crushingly bad films of the 1990s and was expected to be a massive success. Brian De Palma directed it based on a bestseller about the stock market, and Tom Hanks was cast as the master of the universe. And this was expected to be his Oscar moment. He was looked on as the next great thing, and it just crashed and burned. I mean, the critics were relentless to this film. They crucified it. They crucified him, and he was finished. His career was done. And Penny Marshall cast him in a supporting role as Jimmy Dugan, a former baseball star who was reduced to coaching women during the war in the 1940s, and he was tremendous as Jimmy Dugan. Every scene he has, he steals. He's got that incredible line, "There's no crying in baseball," and
Yeah.
he can't believe what his life has become, and he sees it through kind of a whiskey soaked world until he starts to find meaning in it all. He likes these girls. He likes what they're doing. He likes that they love baseball, and he starts to find his love of baseball again too. And it's a wonderful performance. He should have been nominated for an Oscar for supporting actor. The film itself was high on my list as among the 10 best of the year, and yet did not get a single Academy Award nomination, which I think is shameful.
Yeah, it really is a great film.
Yes, it is one of the great sports movies ever made.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, the Oscars wouldn't ignore Tom Hanks for long. Jonathan Demme cast him in a movie called Philadelphia. Now, that was sort of groundbreaking for its time. Do you remember what that was like when it was released?
I do. It was groundbreaking. It was the first Hollywood film to deal openly and honestly with AIDS and to take AIDS into the mainstream. And it's not specifically about the illness. It's more about the discrimination of somebody who has AIDS. A lawyer, a high-priced lawyer, Tom Hanks, is fired from his firm because they discover he is gay and they discover he has AIDS, and they're terrified. And they fire him, and he sues them for wrongful dismissal and discrimination. He hires a deeply homophobic lawyer played by Denzel Washington, and the two of them launch an extraordinary case and win this fight. And the movie is more about the relaxing of discriminations, of the homophobic lawyer finally seeing Andrew, Tom Hanks' character, as a human being, and Hanks going through just a myriad of emotions, fear and anger and rage, and back to fear, and then mortal terror about death approaching, and finally acceptance. And it's Robert Altman, when he came out of the screening, the great 70s director, came out and said, why don't they just nominate Tom Hanks 5 times and give him the damn thing? I mean, there was no doubt he was going to win the Academy Award for this performance. It was that good, and sure enough, he did. And then proceeded to give one of the great acceptance speeches of all time. The only downside, and Tom Hanks has said this publicly, is that Denzel Washington was not nominated alongside him, because he said the two of them could not have done the work they did without each other. And I absolutely believe that.
Yeah, and Hank's performance goes so far beyond just losing the weight.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. The look in his eyes, just that lost, haunted look that dying people have, you know, the despair that they can't even speak the despair. It's so deep. He captured all of that. It's just a tremendously good performance.
I want to wind the clock back a little bit and talk about Big, which I know it has a special place in the hearts of many people I know. What are your thoughts on that film and his performance in it?
Loved it and loved him in it. It was a pleasant surprise. And Spielberg, Steven Spielberg's sister, wrote it. And Penny Marshall from Laverne and Shirley directed it. And she cast Tom Hanks, remembering him from her sitcom days. And he plays a man-child. He wishes to be big, makes a wish with a fortune-telling machine, and wakes up the next morning a grown man. And his mother freaks out, thinking he's been kidnapped by this guy, and his best friend freaks out, but his best friend ends up being the only one that believes him. And he enters into the adult world, gets a job as a toy tester, and is really good at it, starts to make big money, lands a girl, experiences sex for the first time. It's a very funny movie, and Tom Hanks gives it its heart and soul throughout. Got a great set piece where they play a piano in A.O. Schwartz in New York City, where he plays chopsticks with Robert Loggia. That's probably the centerpiece of the movie. But just the giddiness, the sheer childlike giddiness that Hanks has throughout the movie is terrific. When you watch him get off the elevator the morning after he's had sex for the first time, the look in his face and just the cocky awareness of what's happened to him and that he knows everything now is just hysterical, just a hysterical performance. And he got his first Oscar nomination for this.
Yeah, absolutely. Are you a fan of Sleepless in Seattle?
I am. I thought it was a lovely rom-com. I'm a fan of Tom Hanks and Meg Ryan together. I think they have fantastic chemistry. And they had it here and they had it again in You've Got Mail.
Right.
And I think Sleepless in Seattle is a lovely movie. It's entertaining, it's heartbreaking, it gets a tear, and it's got a great happy ending. You know, you can't help but feel for the two of them when they finally meet.
We have to talk about a movie that is, I usually cite it as my desert island movie. Like, if you can only ever watch one movie again for the rest of your life as many times as you want, my go-to is usually Forrest Gump.
It's such a great movie, and you know, people attack it a little bit because it bested Pulp Fiction for best film. And fair enough, Pulp Fiction should have won best film, but I have no argument with Tom Hanks as best actor. His performance in that movie was absolute perfection. And to get an idea of how good it is, go back and watch how he says every single line. I mean, an actor gets handed a script and it's on the page. There's words on a page. There's nothing to tell him how to say it. There might be stage directions for emotions, but that's not doing much. That doesn't tell him how to say it. He finds that on his own. And he found the delivery for Forrest Gump while working with the boy who played him as a child, because the kid couldn't match Tom Hanks' delivery. So Hanks said, well, why don't I match his delivery and make that my delivery throughout the movie? So he did, and it was perfect. Absolutely perfect.
And credit to young Connor Michael Humphreys, who played young Forrest.
Absolutely. And Robert Zemeckis for, you know, having the brains to cast them both. And I'm a big believer Tom Hanks' performance in Forrest Gump is one of the great film performances of all time. He's got two of them on that list, and this is certainly one of them.
I remember really crying hard during a movie that wasn't sort of like a Disney movie or something. I remember first seeing Forrest Gump when I was about, I guess I would have been about 9 or 10.
Yeah.
And I remember really, really weeping hard because of his performance. Mainly, I think when I did an article, 3 movies that readily make me cry, and Forrest Gump was on there because, and it's the line when he's talking at Jenny's grave and he says, "And every night we read a book," because he's so smart, Jenny.
Mm-hmm.
And it breaks me down. And yeah, I mean, it's another testament to just how utterly likable Tom Hanks is.
And he does it so effortlessly, and he does it so minimalistically. I mean, there's nothing grandiose about Forrest Gump at all, or his performance. And I watched it during TIFF last year with my daughter and her boyfriend, and Aurora's like you. She's sobbing at the beginning of the movie. You know, she didn't wait for the end. She's sobbing right at the beginning. And he's got moments like that all the way through the film. The lovely scene with Sally Field when he asks her, leans forward and gets this look in his face and says, "What's my destiny, Mama?" Because he truly wants to know, and he honestly doesn't know. And just moments like that all through the film. Just brilliant performance.
I'm not a smart man, but I know what love is.
That's right.
One of the things that speaks to Forrest's character more to me than anything else is when he finds out he's a father.
Yeah.
And the first question he asks is so selfless, and it's not about him. He wants to know if the kid is smart or if he's,
like him. Yeah.
And it's just a testament to how utterly and intrinsically good Forrest is as a person.
And he goes to sit beside the little guy, and they both tilt their head the same way. It's perfect.
And a great performance from Haley Joel Osment as well.
Yeah.
Tom Hanks has worked with Ron Howard many times, and I think their crowning achievement came in 1995 with Apollo 13.
Yeah, Apollo 13 is a masterpiece. I think it's Ron Howard's best film. I think it was the best film of 1995. I don't know what the Oscars were thinking. To nominate that 9 times and not nominate Ron Howard was a horribly cruel thing to do. And there was a lot of talk as they got closer to the nominations that Hanks would get nominated again. And Tom Hanks himself was saying, oh God, I hope not. But, you know, he should have been nominated for Jim Lovell. He was terrific. He grounds the film. He anchors the film in every way with that sense of quiet heroism. There's no doubt in his mind they're going to get back. They're going to figure it out. But there is that horrible moment where he says that, Houston, we've got a problem. And he knows what the problem is. All of a sudden, they're not going to get to the moon. They got to worry about getting home. And Ron Howard took a film that we knew the ending to. We knew they get home okay, but we didn't know how. Nobody really knew what NASA did and what those astronauts did to get home. And made a wildly entertaining and tension-filled movie about it. Beautifully acted by all of them. Tom Hanks, Gary Sinise, Bill Paxton, Kevin Bacon. Terrific in the movie from top to bottom. And a real shame that the Academy was so ridiculously stupid in that year and gave Best Picture to Braveheart. I don't understand that.
Yeah, and I like Braveheart, but
I do too.
You're absolutely right.
Yeah, Mel Gibson's masterpiece is The Passion of the Christ, not Braveheart.
We have only just scratched the tip of the iceberg when it comes to Tom Hanks' work, but we've already been through three movies that are notable because the American Film Institute made a list of the 100 greatest movie quotes of all time, and Tom Hanks is on there 3 times.
Yeah.
Once for There's No Crying in Baseball, once for Life is Like a Box of Chocolates, and once for Houston, We Have a Problem.
Yes.
It should be noted that it's just a small thing for Apollo 13, but it added a sense of urgency. The original the original transmission was Houston, we've had a problem, past tense. But, of course, they changed it to we have a problem, present tense, for a sense of urgency. Smart choice. 1995 was also a big year because a little studio named Pixar released their first film called Toy Story, wherein Tom Hanks played a pull-string cowboy doll.
Woody the cowboy, and almost instantly became iconic. He and Tim Allen together as Buzz Lightyear were quite a pairing and had tremendous voice chemistry in the film, so much so that they've made 4 of them. And Woody just seems to continue to grow and evolve, and there's greater humor, there's greater sadness, melancholy. Toy Story 3 is one of the saddest films I've ever seen. I mean, talk about a movie getting you to cry.
Yeah.
When the toys are headed for the flame and they all take hands fearlessly. They're going to die together. My God, that was incredible. And then they come up with a 4th one that's I didn't think it was as strong as the 3rd one, but still a very good movie. And Hanks nails it. He's firing all 4 cylinders with this all the time.
Yeah, I can't remember who said it to me, but Toy Story 3 was the end of Andy's arc, the boy, where Toy Story 4's brought Woody's story to a close.
Yeah.
And did so, I think, in a beautiful way.
I did too. I thought it was a perfect ending. I hope that's it, though. I hope they're done.
Yeah,
because I think it ended on such a perfect way. There's nowhere to go, really. And if they do another, then they're only doing it for money, and that would be a shame.
1996 marked a year where the director and screenwriter Tom Hanks came into the forefront with a little movie about a one-hit wonder band in the 1960s called That Thing You Do.
Yeah, this was at TIFF, and I saw this at TIFF, and was very popular, kind of a mainstream bubblegum movie. Really wasn't that big a success with the critics. They had some nice things to say about it, but I think everybody knew it's not a work of art. It's just a half decent, good little time wasting movie. Nothing more. And Tom Hanks has not directed much throughout his career, and I think he realizes his talents lie on screen. But I'm happy he made the film. I'm happy he made That Thing You Do, because he knows that now. He discovered that about himself.
I must give Mr. Hanks props for That Thing You Do, because we had seen, this is the musician and the guitar player in me talking now. We'd seen in films like the Buddy Holly story where a lot of the musical instruments were not historically accurate, but Tom Hanks, who does play the guitar, he made sure that all of the instruments in That Thing You Do were period accurate, and a lot of them were from his own collection, in fact.
So he
That's
learned from the directors he worked with. He learned from Spielberg, Zemeckis, and Ron Howard. He learned detail is hugely important. That's good.
Yeah, and now Hanks and Spielberg had been friends for a while, but 1998 marks their first on-screen collaboration in what's often considered the greatest war film of all time, Saving Private Ryan.
Yes, and it came together so quick, so quick. Within 5 weeks, this movie was a go. Steven Spielberg read it and wanted it, bought it from Robert Rodat. Tom Hanks happened to have it at the same time and wanted to do it. And Paramount got a hold of them and they said, look, we'll make this movie with you. We can make it with DreamWorks. Tom Hanks wants it. Steven Spielberg wants it. Spielberg and Hanks didn't even know it yet, that they were going to be working together. Then they got a phone call. They were put together in a conference call. And the next day it's a go. They're looking for locations. And it came together so quickly. And I saw that movie for the first time at 7 a.m. at the old Uptown Theater in Toronto. And there were 12 of us, 12 members of the Toronto press. And we rarely spoke after a movie. We'd watch it, then we'd go our separate ways. We all knew each other. We nodded. None of us were close friends, though. But after this movie, we all went for coffee, every one of us. It hit us so deeply. And then I had a chance to see it again with veterans groups. And watching the veterans watch this movie, some of them sobbing, some of them get up to leave. And at the end of it, I was talking to one of them and I said, how close was it? He said, the only thing missing was the smell. He said, you couldn't smell the smoke or the bullets or the blood or the sea air. You couldn't smell it. Other than that, perfect. And Hank's performance, this guy took away dialogue. He had speeches that he deleted because he didn't think Captain Miller would say these things. And if you watch his performance, the greatness of his performance lies in his quiet moments. The scene where the little medic dies, Wade, and Hanks goes off by himself over the wall and breaks down and weeps because he feels that he's killed another man. That's the greatness of this performance. It's not what he's saying. It's what he's not saying, what he's feeling and showing us. And again, a tremendous piece of acting from Tom Hanks, again nominated for the Oscar. He could have won. He could have won, and it would have been just as earned as his other two.
Yeah, for sure. There's endless conversations we could have about that film. Cast of Thousands as well. I want to talk about a film he made the following year. When Frank Darabont made The Shawshank Redemption, he had considered Tom Hanks for the role of Andy Dufresne, but I believe Hanks had scheduling conflicts with Forrest Gump.
Yes, it did.
So when Darabont was set to make The Green Mile, he finally got Hanks on board to play Paul Edgecombe, and I think the magic that Darabont found, once again, he's adapting a Stephen King story. I think The Green Mile is just a fantastic film, and again, Hanks just brilliant in it.
I agree. I love The Green Mile, and it's one of those movies. If it's on TV when you're flipping channels, you can't not watch it. You have to watch it, even when you've seen it 1,000 times. You watch it again. And I think, again, the beauty of Hanks as an actor is when I interviewed some of the actors on that film, one of them said that even on the days that Tom wasn't on set, he came to set, got into costume, and read the lines when they were doing the close-ups of the different characters. The John Coffey character said that. And he said, so I've got Tom Hanks on his day off delivering an Academy Award performance in scenes that aren't going to be seen. He's not going to be seen. They're shooting me today. That's the kind of guy Tom Hanks is. And this movie is very different from anything he's ever done. It's a fantasy. I mean, fantastical things happen in this movie, and yet he seems to ground it in that reality. And the one thing I wish they had done is that I wish that they had allowed Tom Hanks to play himself as an old man rather than going with Dub Taylor. Apparently they put Hanks in old man makeup and it just didn't work. They didn't like it. Hanks didn't like it. So they cast Dub Taylor as the older Paul Edgecombe. I would have liked to have seen Hanks portray that, to go all the way with the character.
Yeah, I was going to bring up the thing about him coming to set on the days off, and I had honestly forgotten where I'd heard that story, and now I'm starting to think I heard it from you.
It might have been.
Yeah. 2000 would be a very big year for Tom Hanks. He reunited with Robert Zemeckis to make a film called Castaway.
and he should have won his third Academy Award for Castaway.
I
I saw Castaway with the press, went home, told Sherry about it. We went to see it the next Saturday when it opened, and she, like me, was blown away by it, absolutely knocked out by it. And every frame of that movie, I think, is perfection. The change in Hanks over the course of the film. He arrives on the island, this man obsessed with time. And over the course of the 4 years he's there, time means nothing. Time means nothing to him. And there's that great scene where he knocks his tooth out, and we see a fish, a spear goes through the fish. They cut to Hanks, and he's become primal man. The beard is long and bleached, and he's wearing rags. His body is tanned and muscled and toned, and he's survived. He's learned how to survive in this place that has no sense of time. And it's such a brilliant performance. He's on screen almost by himself, almost 2/3 of the movie, and he carries it. And he carries it with such subtle character developments and tones and changes. It's just a remarkable piece of acting. And I saw that for the second time 5 days before my car accident in 2001. And Sherry always said it was the survival instinct that kept me going. You know, it was deep in my head somewhere. I don't know about that, but that's what she thought.
I always talk about that Academy Award season, and I always have to preface it with whoever I'm discussing it with, and I say, hey, look, I love Gladiator. I think Gladiator's a dope movie. I think I like Russell Crowe in Gladiator, but Russell Crowe was just scowling and badass. Tom Hanks made me cry for a volleyball.
Tom Hanks played a human being, and Russell Crowe, you're right, played a badass, played a cliche. And I thought Russell Crowe perhaps should have won the Oscar the year before for The Insider. And I think they gave it to him for Gladiator because he didn't win for The Insider. And they robbed Tom Hanks. The Golden Globes gave it to Tom Hanks. I mean, the Golden Globes actually did the right thing. But yeah, he should have won. The New York Film Critics gave him Best Actor, and that's a huge thing for any actor to win. But for Hanks to win it for Castaway was quite something.
The scene where he loses Wilson when he's at sea.
God. Well, he's losing part of himself. You know, he's
Yeah.
losing who he became on the island, and he treasures that so much because I think he wants to share that with Kelly and with everybody else when he gets back. And when he loses him, he can't. He realizes, I'm never going to be able to share what I became on that island. And he's absolutely right. He can't. It's a powerful movie. Boy, I'm going to watch it tonight.
Right on. Tom Hanks, let me just see my notes here. He was a producer on my Big Fat Greek Wedding. I don't really think we need to talk about that. But he, in 2002, reunited with Steven Spielberg for a movie with Leonardo DiCaprio and Christopher Walken called Catch Me If You Can. And
again, a great caper movie. DiCaprio plays Frank Abagnale, who was one of the great fraudsters in American crime history. He was a 17-year-old kid who started writing bad checks, and over the course of 10 years wrote over $4 million in bad checks. He at various times impersonated an airline pilot. I mean, think about that, an airline pilot. He was pretending to be a pilot. He was getting on jets. He was a lawyer at one point, and in court, he passed the bar. He was a doctor and a working doctor, and he did it by watching Marcus Welby on television and old TV shows about doctors. I mean, the guy was an absolute chameleon and some kind of whacked out genius. And Tom Hanks plays the guy who tracks him down, and he meets him at one point. They're in a hotel room, and Abagnale fakes him out, says he's an FBI agent, and gets past him. And the two of them together, this is the film where DiCaprio became an actor. I think he nailed this part completely, and I think working with Hanks elevated his game, and vice versa, working with DiCaprio elevated Hanks' game. And both of them deserved Oscar nominations that didn't happen, which was pretty shameful. It's a wonderful, bouncy movie. It's a lot of fun, and you're watching two actors go toe-to-toe with each other and play off each other incredibly well.
Walken was nominated for supporting, was he not?
Yes, he was. Yes, he was. And anytime Walken's on screen, I'm there. I love that guy. And he was terrific in this, really terrific. Played a very different part for Chris Walken.
I really like Tom Hanks's Massachusetts accent, and he's got a great sense of comedic timing to him in certain scenes, especially where he tells his knock knock joke.
Yeah. And even when DiCaprio bests him in that room, he admires him for it. He's mad at himself. He's ticked off at himself, but he's also thinking, "Man, he got me. Kid got me."
Yeah,
And you got to like that. He's he's very self-aware.
I think that's very true of Hanks in general. And he's not a traditional Brad Pitt looking leading man. I think he knows. I've heard someone describe him. He's America's big brother.
Great. Yeah, great. Great. I heard someone describe him once as this generation's Jimmy Stewart.
Yeah.
And that's a wonderful compliment, but I think he's a complete original. I think he's this generation's Tom Hanks.
Yeah, for sure. We cannot go past 2002 without speaking about a film I know you and I both think is an absolute masterpiece, and that's Sam Mendes' Road to Perdition.
Love it. I loved it from the first moment I saw it. I saw it with the press, and I went to see it opening day when it came out just to show my wife Tom Hanks as a bad guy, as a hitman for the Irish mob. Road to Perdition was based on a graphic novel, and when I heard Tom Hanks was going to play a mafia hitman, I was surprised, to say the least. But 10 minutes into the movie, we're good. We're okay. It's going to be fine. He's this quiet, tough as nails, ruthless killer for John Rooney, played by Paul Newman, and he's almost a son to Paul Newman's character. And it's ironic that he ends up having to kill Paul Newman, but Newman looks at him and says to him, "I'm glad it's you, Mike. That at least he's being killed by someone he loves and who loves him." And again, I thought the Academy blew it completely. 6 nominations, but Mendes, Hanks, Best Picture should have been there. Shameful it's not.
Endlessly rewatchable.
Yes, it is. It is, and it's such a beautiful movie. It's shot so well, and the cinematography won an Oscar, and it's just a stunning recreation of the period. Everything about it is perfect. It's a flawless movie completely, and the Academy gave Best Picture that year to Chicago. Jesus.
Yeah. One of the most powerful scenes to me is when he comes home and his eldest son is sitting at the kitchen table, and he runs upstairs to see what's happened, and the camera just stays down there in the dining room, and you just hear it off screen, and he marches up the stairs, and then you just hear him scream, "No!" And it's just so affecting.
Absolutely. And the look on his face when he finally finds Daniel Craig's character is perfect. A bit of triumph, but also a bit of regret that it came to this.
Yeah. And you said when John Rooney says, "I'm glad it's you," it's that sense of tragedy that when you lead lives like this, that's the best you can hope for in the end. Yeah.
Well, Paul Newman has a great line. He says, "None of us will ever see heaven." And he's very aware of what he is, Paul Newman's character, and so is Hank's character, Michael. They're both killers. They know it. They've slaughtered men. They're going to slaughter more men, and they know the consequences. We talked about that with De Niro's character in The Irishman. The consequences for the life you lead. You will end up a lonely man because everybody you know will be killed, and you might have to kill them.
And it harkens back to Hyman Roth in The Godfather Part 2. This is the business we've chosen.
Yes, absolutely.
I would like to talk about the next Steven Spielberg, Tom Hanks collaboration, which is a film I absolutely love, and Hanks's performance carries it, and that's The Terminal.
I'm a big fan of Tom Hanks in The Terminal. I thought his performance in that was Chaplin-esque. I thought he captured the comedy and the drama brilliantly. And I was a little worried at the beginning of the movie when he started speaking with his accent, but he maintained it. It's flawless. He doesn't lose the accent ever. And I think that character is defined by the scene where he's building the wall and he's dancing and doing a jig and having the time of his life working, making money. He's happy. He's happy. He's found a home for the time being. And I don't know why critics and audiences beat up on that movie. I don't think it's the greatest movie of Steven Spielberg's career. It's somewhere in the middle, but I think it's one of Tom Hanks' best performances.
Yeah, I think he's absolutely phenomenal in it. And you took the words right out of my mouth, Chaplin-esque.
Yeah,
When he's telling the guy about, oh God, is it Diego Luna? He's
yeah,
trying
the
to
Uncle
get
Spanish
information
guy. Yep, yep.
on Zoe Saldana's character, and he's talking about her relationship, and he says he cheats, but it's eat shit because of his accent.
Yeah, yeah.
Eat shit, eat shit. You no shit. You no take your shitting. Just a really, really fun performance. And again, Hanks carries it. I would like you to talk about a movie I know it's near and dear to your heart, The Polar Express.
I love the Polar Express. From beginning to end, I love it. I love what Bob Zemeckis did with the book, how he expanded it, and how he placed complete faith in Tom Hanks in so many characters. Hanks plays the hero boy. He plays the hero boy's father. He plays the conductor, and he plays Santa Claus. He plays the hobo, the ghostly hobo that keeps showing up. He's all through this movie. I thought they captured the idea of what the North Pole would be, of what Santa's workshops would be, of what Santa Claus would be. And when the train arrives in the North Pole and the elves are walking by the train and the kids are going, look at the elves, and they look out and the elves are doing somersaults and flipping and flopping, and their movements are almost balletic. And they get to the center of the square, and then Santa Claus shows up. To me, that must be in a kid's mind, because it was in my mind when I was a kid, what the North Pole must be and what Santa Claus must be. And I thought they pulled that off to perfection, to absolute perfection. And the critics weren't especially kind to the Polar Express. I don't know why. Yeah, The Incredibles deserved the Oscar that year for animated feature film, but the Polar Express certainly deserved to be nominated, and it wasn't. And I think that's a real crime. I watch it every Christmas. I watched it in the summertime, just to see it, and I think it holds up very well. I love it.
As a Christmas movie, it just gives you everything you want as far as feels go,
Absolutely, absolutely. And it captures the time, I think, in my life when Christmas was like that. I was born in 1959, so the Christmas they're portraying is of the late 50s and early 60s, and that was my childhood. So it's near and dear to me in that sense.
I want to talk about a movie that my mother absolutely loves, and that's Charlie Wilson's War.
It's a good movie. Mike Nichols directed this, and Mike Nichols had a great reputation in working with actors, and this movie is exactly why Mike Nichols had that reputation. Every actor in the movie does great work. Tom Hanks plays a real life character, Charlie Wilson, and it's based on true events. He was a cocaine snorting, hard drinking, womanizing senator who happened to know and sleep with the most powerful woman in Texas, and he started a war on her behalf. And the film documents how that happened. Tom Hanks plays, I guess the best definition I've heard of him is a rascally Southerner. And that's exactly what he was, a hard drinking, constantly coke snorting Southern guy who has his whole staff always trying to keep him out of the newspapers because there's always something about him. It's got great supporting performances. Julia Roberts is wonderful. Philip Seymour Hoffman is terrific. Amy Adams shows up as one of his secretaries. Really good movie. Really good movie. I thought this is one that the Academy could have been a little kinder to. I think Philip Seymour Hoffman was nominated, but that's it.
I just want to briefly mention that same year, 2007, The Simpsons long-running television show finally made their jump to the big screen, and I loved it at the time. My favorite actor, Tom Hanks, had a cameo in it. My favorite band, Green Day, showed up in it, and I just thought that was pretty spectacular. Tom Hanks has played, all kinds of different characters, but we talked a little bit about Toy Story 3. I want to talk a bit about Cloud Atlas. This is a movie that I'm not really sure how well it was received or if people really get it. What are your thoughts?
I think you're absolutely right. I think it wasn't well received because so many people didn't get it. And a lot of people were so close-minded, they didn't try to get it. They didn't sit back and let the movie try to expand their mind. Movies are meant to educate and entertain. And there are some movies that are like rock music, meant to expand your mind. And this movie, I think, was meant to educate, entertain, and expand your mind. It deals with the soul moving through history and the fact that the soul, and I believe this, the soul never dies. Energy never dies. I'm a big believer we've all gone through once before, maybe twice, maybe three times, and we will all go through again. I think that's what makes time travel possible. Tom Hanks' character, he plays, I believe, 6 characters in the film, moves through time constantly. And no secret is made of these people showing up as different characters through the film. You have Hugh Grant, you have Halle Berry, you have Tom Hanks. Hanks, I think, gives the best performance of all of them in the film. And his final character, a futuristic man after the apocalypse, is especially touching, especially powerful. And I think it's a masterpiece. I think it's one of those movies that in 10 years, 15 years, they're going to look back on and say, my God, how did we ever miss this movie? Well, they did, and it happened. They missed The Searchers in 1956, and now it's regarded as possibly the greatest Western ever made. I think Cloud Atlas will be discussed as one of the great fantasy films ever made at some point.
It's a film of just endless ambition.
It is. It is. And it's got so many things that work, you know, the production design, the music, the musical score to that is spectacular. And not a bad performance in it. Wonderful makeup. You know, there's characters in there that play different genders, and you're hard pressed to figure out who they are. You know, it was just, I saw it again. It's when I saw it, TIFF, and was just overwhelmed by it. And yet I heard people talking on the way out, what the hell was that? What do you call that? What kind of movie is that? Well, that's artistic masturbation. No, artistic masturbation is The English Patient or David Cronenberg's Crash. That's artistic masturbation. Cloud Atlas is a work of art.
Or Aronofsky's Mother.
Yes.
Another thing that's interesting about the movie is that it was essentially 2 productions, because the Wachowskis co-directed with Tom Tykwer, and they were basically running a series of different productions that were, you know, one day they'd be under the direction of the Wachowskis, and one day they'd be under the direction of Tom Tykwer in another time and place. And it's just really, I heard that the book was considered unfilmable, but I think the ambition behind it is something to be recognized in and of itself. And I agree. I think it's a masterfully executed film.
Yeah, you're right. The book was considered unfilmable, and that's exactly why the Wachowskis went after it. They're like that. They decide to do things that people say we can't do it. Watch us. And
yeah, exactly. Hold my beer. You know, it's one of those. The Academy has, I mean, this year Hanks is nominated for supporting actor, but they've ignored him for a while.
Too long.
What about Captain Phillips? I mean, there's an ongoing joke that you should never travel with Tom Hanks, and if you look at his movies, you can understand why.
True enough. There's a scene in Captain Phillips that goes on for about 5 minutes, and it's at the end of the film when he's been taken into the medical unit of the ship that's rescued him, and he's in shock. And for that 5-minute scene alone, Tom Hanks should have been nominated for an Academy Award. He's absolutely riveting. I've seen people in shock, and I've been in shock myself, and he nailed it. He was absolutely perfect portraying that character. But he's perfect all through the film. Long story short, Captain Phillips is based on a true story about an American captain whose ship was boarded by pirates and taken over by Somalia pirates off the coast of Africa. And they meant business. They weren't kidding. They were quite prepared to shoot and kill. And he managed to keep most of his crew alive and keep himself alive at the same time. And a very powerful film. Paul Greengrass directed the film. He made United 93, the story of the flight over Pennsylvania that was brought down by the passengers. And he gives this film that same kind of documentary feel and documentary look to it. And Hanks was considered a shoo-in for a Best Actor nomination, and they blew it. They didn't nominate him. They completely blew it. And he could have been nominated for Supporting Actor that year for his performance as Walt Disney in Saving Mr. Banks. I mean, 2013 should have been a year of Tom Hanks, and the Academy, for whatever reason, didn't.
Yeah, well, that brings me to Saving Mr. Banks. How do you successfully portray an American icon? I guess you get another American icon to play him.
You do, and he captured what you know what he did? He captured how the public sees Walt Disney.
Right.
I don't think he had any interest in playing Walt Disney as Walt Disney was. Walt Disney wasn't a very nice man,
No.
and he sympathized with the Nazis, which is another reason to have issues with Walt Disney. But Tom Hanks played the smiling, genteel TV host we knew every Sunday night from the wonderful world of Disney. And in that, fair enough. That's how they saw him. That's how they chose to create him. Good enough. He did that well. Um, I thought it was a terrific movie. I thought Emma Thompson was an absolute delight. I thought the two guys that played the songwriters were
Yeah.
tremendously good. It was just a very entertaining movie about how a classic was made. And Walt Disney truly believed Mary Poppins was going to be his Oscar movie. He never won an Oscar for Best Picture, and he wanted one. He desperately wanted one because he saw it as acceptance um, in Hollywood of him as a human being, and he knew what kind of human being he was. And it didn't get that. It won 5 Oscars, Best Actress, and deservedly so, but not Best Picture.
Bridge of Spies, once again working with Spielberg.
And once again, a film for which he could have been nominated for Best Actor. He plays a high-priced lawyer who is brought in to defend a Soviet spy. And this guy's guilty. He's a spy. He's been busted. And he's played with real sly charm by Mark Rylance. It's a really good performance. And, I was cheering for Sylvester Stallone for supporting actor that year for Creed.
Yeah,
I know you were, and I know you were too. But Rylance, it's tough to argue Rylance not winning. It's a great performance. He bounces off of Hanks beautifully. The two of them have this lovely dialogue, just back and forth and back and forth. And he'll only tell him enough to get him by. He won't tell him everything. And they kind of challenge each other until they trust each other, and then they start to talk. And of course it's Tom Hanks. Of course he's going to start talking to Tom Hanks. Who wouldn't?
Right.
But Hanks played the character so beautifully, so honestly, and with such integrity. He made the movie.
Yeah, I was rooting for Stallone, but Rylance, I mean, it was close. But
Yeah.
and
I'd
again,
like to
yeah,
see,
you know,
I'd like to see the voting because I'll bet it was within 5 votes.
yeah, it's another. You watch that movie and you wonder if have we become unfair and that we just expect Hanks to be this good all the time?
I think there's an expectation of all great actors that we have, and I do think it's unfair. I mean, who expected Jack Nicholson to ever give a bad performance? But he did in his last movie, and how do you know? He was dreadful. Who expected Paul Newman to ever be bad? But he was. A lot of great actors have given weak to bad performances. Tom Hanks gave one. Larry Crowne with Julia Roberts is awful, and he directed it, and it's a terrible movie. So he's not given very many bad performances. He's a pretty solid actor from top to bottom, but they're there. If you look for them, they're there.
Yeah. Well, nobody's perfect.
Absolutely.
Tom Hanks might be close, but nobody's perfect. Let's talk about his collaboration with Eastwood on Sully.
This was interesting because, as you know, I've interviewed Clint Eastwood quite a lot, and I know what he looks for when he auditions. I know what he looks for when he casts. And with Tom Hanks, he just cast him. He wanted him to play that character. There was no one else he was interested in playing that character. He called one actor, and it was Tom Hanks. And Tom Hanks' reaction was the same as Sean Penn's. He calls, I'm there. I've got one line in the movie, I'm there. And the two of them worked beautifully together. Hanks loved that Eastwood shot rehearsal. He loved that he often just went with one take. Hanks doesn't like to do a lot of takes. He's good in the first couple of takes. So he was down with that. And he liked that Eastwood was done by 5 o'clock because he was going golfing that night.
Yeah, totally.
And they worked together. They believed in the economy of filmmaking. You don't have to spend a ton of money. It's all about the story. It's all about the characters. So they focused on the characters. And again, Hanks was robbed of the nomination for Sully. He should have been nominated for that as well.
I know you're a huge fan of The Post.
I am. Again, talk about a movie that they got ripped off on. 2 nominations, Best Picture, Best Actress. And this is one of the great stories of the American press ever made. The Pentagon Papers became available to 2 newspapers in the early 70s. And the only one that had the guts to print them was the Washington Post, who would very soon become famous for Watergate. And Tom Hanks plays Ben Bradley, the editor of the Post. Now, previously, Jason Robards won an Oscar in '76 playing Ben Bradley in All the President's Men. And to me, he was the ultimate Ben Bradley. But Tom Hanks stepped in there and did a pretty damn fine job as Ben Bradley. He's a guy who has the integrity of the Constitution behind him. He knows what the Constitution says about the freedom of the press, and he's dedicated his life to that. And he has to convince the owner of the paper of the same thing. And to his luck and to his credit, he does. And she is every bit as decent as he is, played by Meryl Streep. And the 2 of them have lovely scenes together where you can see the intellect of each actor bouncing off the other. And you just know that they were loving working together, and they did love to work together. And Spielberg, I mean, can you imagine being the director of that film, working with those 2 talents? What a treat.
Yeah, I mean, no, you can't imagine. So this brings us to this year, where Tom Hanks has finally gotten another Academy Award nomination. I know you and I both saw the film at TIFF, and I just want to mention that when I heard Tom Hanks was going to play Mr. Rogers, there was maybe a microsecond in my head where I'm just like, well, he doesn't look anything like Fred Rogers, but then you know, it's Tom Hanks, and then you see the trailer and he walks onto the set and he just starts singing It's a Beautiful, and you're like, oh, okay, of course it's Tom Hanks, and we're all in.
He had me 5 minutes in when he comes in onto the screen and he's singing the song and he takes off the shoe and he takes off the other shoe and puts on the cardigan. 2 things got me, and it wasn't so much his voice, it was his smile and his eyes, the gentleness of his eyes. You know, he knew that he was performing for children, and that children were tuning into that show to learn about manners and goodness and decency and love thy neighbor. And that's what he believed in, and that's what he exuded in that film. And I didn't have any problem when I heard he was going to play. My first thought was, well, who else?
Yeah.
And he delivered. He delivered a wonderful performance. I'm a little surprised that they chose to campaign him for supporting actor, but he wasn't the lead. The movie wasn't necessarily about Mr. Rogers. It was about the impact Mr. Rogers has on this particular man, and it's based on a true story. So I like the film very much. Nicely directed by Marielle Heller again. She's someone to watch, and I'm thrilled that Hanks is nominated. I don't think he has a prayer of winning. I don't think anybody's got a chance against Brad Pitt, but I'm glad he's back in the game.
There is a scene where the guy interviewing him, he's trying to get a rise out of him, and he asks about, oh, it must have been tough for your kids growing up with Mr. Rogers as a dad. And he just gives this perfect response where he's like, oh, well, you know, yes, they might have struggled and I have had problems, but thank you for that perspective. And then the guy just is like, ugh. He's like, I can't get a rise out of him no matter what.
Yeah. And apparently that was Fred Rogers. You know,
the man was a champion. Absolutely.
Yeah, he wasn't acting. He truly was that type of guy that exuded goodness. And you know, who better to play that than Tom Hanks?
Absolutely. And I've said it before and I'll say it again. A Beautiful Day in the Neighborhood is the exact opposite movie that Joker is.
Yes, completely. Good point.
100% antithetical to each other. And,
yeah.
And they released in the same year. I think you're right. I don't think he has a prayer of winning, but it's nice to see him nominated. 2020 is going to be a big year for Mr. Hanks. He's got 3 movies coming out this year.
Yeah, and they're all major films, and they're all films that could land him back in the Oscar circle next year. I'm particularly interested in the Civil War movie that comes out next Christmas.
I'm looking here. So one of them is called Greyhound. One of them is called News of the World. That's not it. That's a science fiction drama. Okay, so Paul Greengrass is doing News of the World, and that's the Civil War one.
Okay. Well, there you go. That's the one I'm excited about.
Yeah,
It'll likely be it too.
yeah. Greyhound is one that Hanks is also serving as screenwriter.
I read that he'd written that film, and he thought about directing it, but decided, thank God, he decided not to, because I don't think Tom Hanks is a director, and there's no shame in that.
No, of course not.
Jack Nicholson was a brilliant actor, one of the greatest in the history of film, but he was a lousy director.
Well, you got to know your strengths, and
That's right. And some can do it, some can't.
We've pretty much covered the man's entire career. Is there anything that you'd like to see Mr. Hanks do that you haven't seen?
I'd love to see him play a completely batshit crazy bad guy, just a drooling psychopath. I'd love to see that, just to see if he can. And of course he can. He'd be great. But I'd love to see it. Love to see him play
someone just utterly unlikable.
Yeah. I mean, Matt Dillon did that last year in The House That Jack Built, which is just a punishing movie. And I'd love to see Hanks do something like that. But I don't think he gets those offers, and I'm not sure that he would go out and create that for himself.
He, of course, received the Cecil B. DeMille Award for Lifetime Achievement at this year's Golden Globes.
Yep.
Thought that was a nice little montage they put together for him.
It was. It really displayed his career. It displayed everything we're talking about right now. You know what? There was talk once he was going to play Roosevelt, and that would have been interesting. Not Teddy, but Franklin.
Okay, I was going to say that would make much more sense.
Yeah, there was talk he was going to do a biography of Franklin Roosevelt at one time, and that would have been interesting. I don't know if that'll ever come up again. I hope it does, because he would be terrific. Bill Murray pulled it off, so Tom Hanks would blow it out of the water.
Kenneth Branagh also did a good job.
He did. He was good in that.
What else? We talked about the Cecil B. DeMille Award. I liked his little joke presenting the best actress at the SAGs, where he's like, we've checked the records, and Harriet Tubman, Megyn Kelly, and Judy Garland are all in the same category. It was often 2 out of 3.
Yeah.
That was funny. All right, man. Well, thanks for talking to me, and we'll put this one in the book for podcast number 3. Thanks to all our listeners. We are up and running with our official YouTube channel. Please like and subscribe. There you have it, folks. January 20, 2020. That's episode 003, A Handful of Hanks in the Bag. Once again, thank you to all of our listeners. You can find us online at footandfriendsonfilm.com. You can find us on Facebook, Twitter, and now on YouTube, footandfriendsonfilm.com. Be sure to like and subscribe so you can check out all past and future podcasts. Stay tuned for the next episode, where John and I are going to be discussing one of the most illustrious careers in Hollywood by arguably the greatest thespian in the world. That's going to be Miss Meryl Streep. I'm your host, Nick Mailer. Till next time, we'll see you at the movies.